And in this episode, we will talk about, well, we'll talk about the politics of economics, politics of economics. Anyway, of course, we're in the political season, and we have still about economy, and of course, the right is saying the left is wrong, and the left, of course, is saying the right is wrong. And they both have no solution, although the side that's not in power, of course, claims a solution which they cannot have because there is no solution. When your world is in an economy that is bad as the last Great Depression, and the only way we got out of the last Great Depression, the only way we got out of the last Great Depression was a really big World War. We called number two. Yes, we called it World War II, and we got ourselves out of that Great Depression by building a war machine. Well, I don't think we have enough terrorists in the world to chase ourselves out with a war on terror of this Great Depression that we're in. But let's not get all depressed. It's really not my intention here to talk about the depression, but the alternate, the inflection point in human history when we create the power to create infinite money. But before we move on, let me just explain to you what I knew back in 2005 when I offered to buy the world. Well, and I also suggested that Alan Greenspan be in charge of the 10 business bulls. Why Alan Greenspan? He's the only one among you, I believe, that you would have believed his gobbledygook when he got up on the TV and explained that one crazy old man had instructed them on a way to create infinite money in our reality. But we'll get back to that. So, it was obvious back then. It should have been obvious to even a fifth grader that real estate, well, California was like the epitome of it. Real estate in California had for 4 years had gone up 25% a year. It's just not viable to continue. Why did you know it's a bubble? The only way you can sustain that kind of rise. Real estate is totally dependent on income. It's the biggest part of our paycheck. It's where our expenses are. And well, in places like California, New York, it takes a massive chunk out of our expenses. Well, if our incomes aren't rising the same rate our houses are, in our current reality, built on mortgages, well, we're dead meat. And we found all about that when the nation's real estate went from 20 trillion plus to below down way around 10. I won't go into all the numbers, but our real estate crashed massively. Well, actually, in 2005, I had offered, and I could offer it now, and I offered then 1.5 times all the price of all the real estate. Now think about this. We'll get back to that. 1.5 times. Actually, we've gone up farther than that since then. The thing was, I think I figured out for us that the only solution was to create our own infinite bubble. The only way to ensure ongoing prosperity for California, for the United States, and for the rest of the world is our own infinite bubble. How do you create your own infinite bubble? And that's where it gets down to. We start playing the games for ourselves, not against ourselves. Now, so let's imagine for a second that I wanted to instruct you all throughout the world how to get out of your mess. You're tied to denominations of dollars, rupees, and wands. You're tied to denominations of currencies that are interconnected to themselves, that are bound to fail, piled by massive debt. Why are they bound to fail? Well, the debt keeps going up, the economy keeps going down. But here was the challenge that we faced in 2005, and 7 years later, now June 16th, 2012, we still face the same challenge. And we'll continue to face this challenge forever every day for the rest of your known lives until we change. And there is a change that I recommend, but let's get back to that. So, the solution is to cancel politics, to cancel nations, as you know, to create a new enterprise of us, where the people of all nations join together in one enterprise with one global bank. Why is this private nation of us and global bank so important? Think about this. Back then, when gold was 600 an ounce, I offered to buy all your gold on the planet on behalf of the people for $2,000 an ounce. How? Well, let's not ask how I could do it. Once you create infinite money, you create a virtual store of value. It's a perception of what the real value of this money is versus your debt-laden currencies. But this money and the stock in the enterprise of the people would be owned by the people of all the nations. But think about this. I offered for your gold. Now, who has the gold? Well, lots of people have the jewelry, so the people get richer when the price of gold. By the way, once I get your gold, all the available ones that have sold at $2,000 an ounce, then I raise the price. Why do I? Because now we have a monopoly on most of the gold. We raise the price to $10,000 an ounce. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Well, but it is ahead of ourselves, because when I buy all the gold from all your gold reserves, that's basically pseudo-worthless in your relative reality, and we monopolize it, we raise it in these couple moves. We would have raised it 19 times its value. Now it runs around 1,700 an ounce. I don't know what numbers it is. The bottom line is, if we have a monopoly of the gold, we can monopolize it all. But gold, in the scheme of things, is really relatively small. In fact, what's sort of bizarre about it is you could put all the gold of all the world into one Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's right. Put it all in one Olympic-sized swimming pool, and that's the world's gold. Well, anyway, what was more interesting is if we started doing that. Well, we talked about doing that before with the technology companies. Let's let that aside. If we own all of our technologies, all of our networks, all of our channels. But then again, how do we control the channels? Don't worry about it. Our big brother will be smart, good, and reasonably open to freedom of speech. And reasonably means really free, but that's not the point here. Anyway, so then we buy all the oil, all the coal just to keep it in the ground, possibly, all the copper, all the iron, all the steel mills, all the refineries, all of it, all of it. We own it all. And so, well, if you think about the oil I offered when it was like 40, 50 a barrel, I said, let's pay the equivalent of $99 a barrel. Well, that's where it's running up about there now. But if you imagined if we took the oil from $100 a barrel now to $300 or $500 a barrel, how long do you think it would take this world to move to solar? Not long at all. What would happen if we moved to solar? We'd be building factories, probably lots of them in China, building out factories to build panels of solar power. We would change our world into renewable energy virtually overnight by the change of the economics of, well, the price of oil in the world. Now, why would we want to do, could we even do that? Well, why would we want to do that? Because we're thinking not with a 5-year plan, we're thinking with not even just a 19-year plan. We're starting in 99 years and thinking to the next 999 years. And once you think into 999 years, the entire equation changes. Okay, so back to the real estate. Here was the proposition. And we could offer the proposition today. We buy all the real estate, everybody's house. Now, you might be attached to your house, but bear with me while we explain our plan. We buy you out. We cancel all your mortgages because we're buying out the banks. But anyway, we buy all the real estate out. okay, at 1.5 times. We could pay more, but let's say that's a fair price. But what we do is we say, okay, you're getting 1.5 times for your house. But what we'll do is we'll make it so you still own your house, but we're going to do it this way. We're going to own a passive interest in your house. We'll own 2/3, you keep 1/3. We'll pay off 100% of your market value of your house. You still own 1/3 of your house, and you get to live in it for the rest of your life. Even if you wanted us to pay off it all, we'd let you live in it for the rest of your life. Your rent might be a little higher, just a little small amount higher. It actually doesn't really matter, because the point is, how can we do this? Because we're counting on that real estate to be in our bank, and see if our bank is backed by all the real estate, and all the oil, and all the gold. See then what happens when the real estate values go up. Well, we as the enterprise might raise your rent a little bit, but we have no great need to raise everybody's rent, because we have a need to make sure our economy is moving and growing. And guess what? We can sit on those rising housing values because we're thinking out 99 years. So it doesn't matter how much it raises, but more. When the rising real estate goes up, that's attached to our bank, guess what happens? The value of our currency, I call them rainbow stars, goes up. And when the value of our currencies goes up, we are richer. But actually, it's the only currency in the world, so it's sort of our own illusion of our own creation. But when we're richer, we can issue more currency off that rising value and make us richer. And, well, I'll let the economists go into the details of how you can create a reserve currency of the world and print money like it's going into style. Actually, what you do with this stuff is you turn it into antiquities, family heirlooms, things, well, they all of a sudden, these pieces of paper have value, because in 1,000 years, people will have them posted on their walls in modern, postmodern, well, ancient art, and they'll say, remember when people worked a day for one of these? Remember when people measured their lives on these pieces of paper? Well, that's not the point, but it sort of is, because you can't even imagine this world that I'm talking about, this new world order of infinite money and of infinite mind. You can't imagine it without understanding its historical roots in the biblical content of the history of the future of Earth. That's right. I believe we have been predestined from the beginning to achieve this path, one world order, one currency with peace. The only way we can achieve this is to end all war in all forms, and to bring people together, to people coexisting and accepting each other, and embracing our history and our heritage and our cultures as we look towards a brave new world of the future. And, well, so just think about that. Well, the point is this: once you have all of this new things, we would actually have to start retiring people out. And instead of raising the retirement age, we would go to lower it. Imagine a world where by the time a child hit 19, he'd effectively had a stipend of retirement for life. And that was the baseline living point, because it's cheaper to provide people with some baseline sustenance and the things that people need to live. It's cheaper to do that than to run a police state or nation. And the only nation that we can have is one nation of one world under, well, sort of one God, but he goes by many names. And that's a longer story which I don't really have the time to prophesy on again. But anyway, we will, oh, this is one of my favorite videos. You should check it out. We the people of Earth.com.biz.org. But that's not it. This video is at, I don't know where it's at, but it's called Mickey Mouse Money. Is your money fun? I think it is. But it's not a laughing matter in your reality. In my mind, that's why money got really funny. Because in my mind, well, because we are here now, this piece of paper is far beyond priceless. And yet it's sort of worthless.